working. Cool. Okay. So this is part 2 of the Hacker News, proving the Hacker News ranking algorithm article. And I think it makes sense to briefly go over the outline.
Yeah.
Because we're working on putting that in text, but like this really contains all the ideas. So yeah, first introduction reference to the last post. I think that's clear, like the 2 problems. Upvotes and quality of the submission do not correlate well, and high quality content gets overlooked. So that's just a small recap. Then we got really good feedback, and we're basically listing the feedback and addressing each of them.
Yep.
So the first one is the naming, like the view, so it's click through. That's something. And the other one is that it favors posts that are obviously not worth clicking. So there are many posts that are not worth clicking, and then they don't get negative feedback.
Yep.
That's the problem with click-throughs. The next one is to get the data for click-throughs, you need to track users. That's also something Hacker News doesn't want to do. Another one, then sorting by average rating. That's also something you mentioned, Jonathan. That's also something we want to take care of. Small example with like few data points and many data points with the same result.
Yep.
And then, an interesting thing we talked about, like because the original Hacker News formula has these exponents.
Yep.
Like upvotes to the power of 0.8, and here for H hours 1.8. This one is like quadratic, so it doesn't matter much. But this one is interesting because this has its own negative feedback for high numbers. Just like the to the power of 0.8 curve, for high numbers, it's below linear.
Right.
Which means
I see. So the marginal value of an additional upvote decreases.
Exactly. While the ratio, why the H penalty is still has the same strength.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like if something got enough upvotes, then the H penalty gets stronger because like the upvote how do you say that? Yeah, you know what I mean. Like
every additional upvote counts less. So
yeah. So then it has a negative feedback in itself. That's something we discovered in the formula.
Yep.
And that's also something that's not necessary anymore once we provide negative feedback ourselves through click-throughs or through impressions. That was
I see. Right. So they kind of are partly solved the problem with that exponent already.
Yeah, it's kind of like an attention limitation. Like, oh, this one got enough attention, so
yeah.
There's a kind of area in there.
Yeah, okay, that's a great point.
That's something we discovered. Yeah, another thing that's not in here is like something like the activity on Hacker News, the page views, differ greatly from time of day and day of week, right?
Yep.
And the thing is, like one idea was to instead of having wall clock time to create a negative penalty, we could also just use number of impressions as a time penalty thing. And then the whole thing behaves completely different. But that was just an idea and we didn't want to put it into that article yet. Just like to, because that would actually balance out the whole different time of day or different number of users coming to the site.
Yeah, impressions, the number of impressions, that's right, because the number of impressions is not affected by rank, or is it? So, for example, if something shows up on page 5 and no one ever goes to page 5, are we counting that as an impression?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we didn't think that through yet.
Because if it does count as an impression, I know in some search engines it does count as an impression, and you were included in the search results even if nobody scrolled down that far. What that means is, there's a relationship between impressions and time that's the same for all pages. And so impressions can kind of be used as a clock in that way.
Exactly.
But it's a clock that is sensitive, that runs faster and slower depending on time of day. That makes sense.
Yep. That's just one idea that future work.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Okay. So, and then the learnings from that feedback are, okay, we have to revise our goals a bit. We added 3 points. So instead of only not producing false negatives, we also do not want to produce false positives. It's like obvious garbage should not get higher rating. That's something that the click-through proposal actually would have produced. And also don't add additional user tracking. It's also directly derived from feedback. And like this one, I don't know, we should edit now already or save it for a future post. We'll see. But that's exactly like the exchanging the clock. Maybe there are other ways.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, then the new idea.
Okay.
The new idea just says basically, okay, let's use impressions instead of click-throughs, and then like have the revised feedback loop pictures. I don't know, did we show that to you? Yeah.
Not the updated loop, but I can imagine what it looks like. Yeah.
I think you can also serve it on the local host, maybe then you can see it in the article.
True. Good idea.
I think it's bundle exec Jekyll serve or something like that.
Jekyll serve live reload. Maybe.
I'm also using Jekyll for my website.
Yeah, it's quite easy, and I'm hosting it on GitHub and
yeah, I'm using GitLab
hosting.
Yeah.
Okay. Was it live server 4000? So yeah, that one was the old feedback loop, the old negative feedback, and then the new one basically also adds impression to the picture, and then it shows that this negative feedback here doesn't cover the whole cycle. The negative feedback has to come earlier, else you have a feedback loop to rank impressions upvotes. That's not balanced.
Right. Okay. Rank impressions.
And then the correction would be like, okay, instead use impressions as a negative.
Yeah. Just thought, I've been reading a book by Pearl. I think it's Judea Pearl, about the new revolution of the causal revolution and new way statisticians are looking at causality and how to analyze confounders and how to control for confounders when doing statistical analysis. And they do these causal diagrams, which remind me exactly of these. These are our causal diagrams, the same sort of diagram. And I just that similarity jumped out at me. I'm not sure there's not necessarily anything from that field that would apply here, but it's an interesting similarity.
Yeah, so we basically I think we took this notation from Wikipedia, but it's not something I learned formally. So if there's any mathematical standard notation for these things, that would be awesome. Could use that one.
Yeah, there is the standard for these causal diagrams, dots and arrows. So instead of circles with a label, you have a dot. Maybe look for Pearl, P-E-A-R-L, and then maybe look on images.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you see.
Yeah, I think I've heard about that.
Yeah.
It's
and
the
do
guy
they
who
also
has
have
a website with the logical fallacies, right? Or the
You know, I don't know actually, quite possibly. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Do they also have like positive and negative feedback? Like, is it?
No,
is
not
it used?
necessarily. So, and so that's something that's different from what's in your model. The idea in positive and negative feedback loops. Yeah, he might talk about that. I just haven't encountered that so far in anything I've read.
Okay. Yeah, that's something we can look into.
Yeah, it's just something that might provide some sort of insight. Who knows?
Like, I think I took the one from
I think with diagrams like this, there's probably 100 ways to draw the diagrams, and maybe some different fields have different conventions, but there's no one right way to do it. Yeah, like this one here with the number of cattle, you know, perfect.
That's also said causal loop.
Yeah.
Not casual, causal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfectly clear.
Okay, yeah, I'll have a look. Yeah, so basically, let's say idea, just move the feedback from the click-throughs to the impressions. Like in the diagram, it's pretty clear because then then there's no unbalanced positive feedback loop anymore.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the main idea, and then the question is like, okay, how do we implement? Like, yeah.
Yeah, right. The question, and you don't have click information. So have you figured out how you're going to implement it, or?
Yeah, there's some ways. Like, first of all, like, what does the formula look like? You see that for the upvotes, we remove the exponent.
Right.
And then we have impressions time the original H formula.
So you don't have rank in there anywhere.
Yeah, because rank doesn't go into the formula. That the question is like, okay, how do we calculate impressions now?
Yeah.
And that's what we have right now. So the thing is, like, our way of thinking, for an impression vote ratio to be comparable across ranks, the impressions need to have the same distribution as the votes, else the ratio doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you mean the same probability distribution?
Yes.
Yeah, let's see. Well, okay. Yeah, by impressions, you mean whatever you're going to define, right? So impressions need to be defined so that it has the same probability distribution as votes.
Exactly, because else the ratio is not comparable.
You might call that weighted impressions instead of raw impressions. So raw impressions is the one we talked about. That's basically a clock.
Yeah.
And you could calculate the number of impressions a post got if you just knew the exact wall clock time that it was first submitted and the current time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Weighted impressions. Yeah. And then, like, this insight led us to, okay, if it needs to have the same distribution, then we need to weight it so it does have the same distribution. So we need the vote distribution data somehow to do that.
Right. And the distribution data you have is, you got it from mining.
We got it from crawling. Here, it's this one. Good.
Right.
And the thing is, this one could change over time. probably quite stable, but who knows?
Yeah.
So it's probably good enough. Like also one question is like, what happens if we just use an approximation to that distribution and use the formula you suggested, like the 1 divided by ranks, that again divided by the page number, so we get these steps,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And it looks different, but the question is that a problem if it looks like this?
Yeah, if it's pretty close, I think it might provide the correct negative feedback. But I wonder, and I think you could even simulate it or to know how close it needs to be. Maybe I'm not sure if that's true. But my intuition would be that as long as you've got a pretty close curve, it's going to be good enough.
I guess so. Maybe you have then some oscillations or some mixing on the front page at the top where like
Exactly.
good stories change ranks all the time, but maybe that's fine.
Yeah, because what you won't have is you replace a positive feedback loop with an oscillation, and that'll actually be more stable. Right? A positive feedback loop just runs away in one direction, while an oscillation, when it gets too far, too imbalanced in one direction, it goes in the other direction.
Exactly. So, but this also depends, like if it's if the formula because there are two ways, like it approximates the too high or too low, and yeah, I remember where we try to approximate the data with the formula, and then we talked about like, okay, what would happen in this case, because it's like all the time below the original distribution. So what would happen? And in some cases we thought, okay, this is fine because this oscillates, and in other cases we thought, oh, this is not fine because like this strengthens the positive feedback again. But overall, it's probably fine because we have this strong, we have this big balancing feedback, and the inner inconsistency or the inner error for the distribution is just an oscillation, as you mentioned. So
Yeah.
maybe that's fine. Yeah.
I mean, it's also self-correcting in a way, because when a rank is not properly depicted by the distribution, then the post moves up or down, and then it's probably on a rank that's more accurately depicted, and then it corrects basically.
Oh.
So yeah, so that's one thing. Like we need to approximate the distribution to weight the impressions, to get a weighted impressions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is essentially correcting for a confounding variable. You know, it's the same. It is something that statisticians have been doing for decades or over 100 years. You know, correcting for a confounding variable. You know, and the standard way to do that is you look at each. If it's a simple confounding variable like gender for a drug study, then what you do is you just isolate the data to males and then isolate the data to females, and you find the effect within each group, and then you do a weighted average of the results. Is kind of roughly how it typically works. And so and
then you apply it to other studies as well, or no, that probably doesn't work. But yeah, but you have this prior data. That's what you're saying to evaluate new results, right?
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is, if there's other, like, you know, I'm not an expert in deconfounding, but whether there may be some other techniques for deconfounding that, or for controlling for a confounding variable that might apply here that I'm not aware of.
Yeah. Yes. So this was, this is like how far we got with the formulation. Overview.
Yeah, I think it's very good. I mean, the outline's very good.
Thank you. Then the question is like, okay, how does it work with, because if we, this is not just weighted impressions, this is like cumulative weighted impression.
Yep.
Right? Because this is cumulative upvotes.
Yep.
And that way we, in the implementation, because we also thought like, okay, how could Hacker News actually implement realistically on the real side? And what they already do, I guess, is counting upvotes. So they should also just count impression, the weighted impressions.
Yep. Every time they display an article, they need to save, not just increase the counter. They need to know, look at what rank was displayed, and save those, save that rank.
Yeah. And that exactly points to another problem, because like Hacker News, like this could be done, like Hacker News recalculates the front page every 15 seconds. So it could be done in this process, like while updating all these ranking scores, you can also like update the cumulative impressions. That's fine. But then it doesn't, these are not real impressions, because you don't take the traffic into account. Like you don't know how many people actually looked at the page.
Yeah, and
there's
so yep, and impressions is potentially very ambiguous term. So you know that we can't actually track eyeballs and know actually how many people looked at the page, but all we can do is count how many times a browser requested the page.
Yeah, but even that is problematic because Hacker News is behind a cache.
Right. Yeah.
So, but maybe we can assume that like if you have some assumptions like, okay, traffic is constant on the page, so the weighted impression, like let's say for every recalculation of the front page, you get 1,000 page hits. If that's a constant number, then it's fine because it doesn't affect the ratio.
Right. Yeah. Do you know if Hacker News is using Cloudflare or any of these other?
I think it's using Cloudflare. I'm not perfectly sure, but I think it does.
I think Cloudflare provides different ways that you can get that data. Cloudflare actually allows you to do some really powerful things with the cache. You can like run code in the cache and kind of customize your code for retrieval and storal of cache documents. It's actually extremely powerful, but you can definitely, I think, get
maybe we can actually access the hit data.
Yeah, so it would tell you, okay, here's how many times this page was requested, and exactly when. And I guess, yeah, no, so I think it'd give you enough information to put everything together. So since the last actual request was made, so Hacker News knows, okay, I served this page that had this exact set of results in this order. And then Cloudflare caches that. And then Cloudflare can tell them, hey, that page actually got exactly this many impressions, this version of the cache page. I think
but then we get it with a time delay, but like 15 seconds is probably fine, I guess. Oops.
Well, yeah, it depends on how quickly they're recalculating their ranking. I imagine it's not that, not necessarily real time.
Yeah.
I'm sure even a delay of several minutes is probably okay for recalculating rankings.
I think they have like, I think the moderator mentioned it's like 15 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And they take the top 1,500 latest submissions and rank them and sort them.
Right.
Yeah, but these are like implementation details that we take into account. So what else was it? Then the whole rating formulas.
Rating formulas.
Then there, yeah, like Bayesian averaging and,
yeah,
and
right. Yeah.
Then there are delays between impression and vote, but I guess we cannot get rid of the delays. I think that's probably just fine because they also will result in small oscillation probably.
Yep. Yeah, so you have two delays, you know, the delay in impression and vote, and then you also have a delay in getting the impression data, which may actually tend to solve that problem, I guess, if the delays are similar.
Mm-hmm. That might be.
But I don't think that matters too much.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, probably not. But we have to understand what happens.
Yep.
If it does, like maybe put that into the simulation too. Yeah.
Yep.
Then the last one is the idea with replacing the time. Yep. So that's it. Like that's the outline of the whole article, and try to finish it and see what the community says.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's a really good outline, and it, you know, really it covers an interesting problem within a context that people are interested in Hacker News, even though this problem has been addressed in other websites, I'm sure. And I don't, you know, if anyone's really laid this all out in a good article like this, you know, these problems and the solutions. You know, there's articles, you probably saw the article recently posted about using Wilson score for sorting results, you know, and that's kind of one piece of a bigger ranking formula. I think this article is going to be really good. That kind of covers all of that.
I also thought about like once we have a good proposal where we don't have any obvious negative feedback anymore and something that can be implemented, probably have to write a new article that puts everything together.
Yeah. Yep.
All the intermediate steps.
Yep. So that reminds me, I think I want to, after getting some feedback from a smaller group, post my articles to Hacker News. And actually, I wonder if you guys managed to get, you know, fairly good ranking for your article. Do you guys have good? Let's see. Here's a question. So submissions. I know a lot of people a lot of people have strategies for ranking on Hacker News. And I wonder if we've considered all those strategies.
So Hacker News has a lot of anti-abuse algorithms in place that are secret.
Yep.
But they usually boil down to they detect voting rings. Like other people, if you ask for votes, then the system probably detects it. If newly created accounts vote for something, they detect it. And what happened for us is we actually we posted it, and then it fell through the new page like every other article. But I also sent it to the moderator, and what they have on Hacker News is, because they're aware of this problem, they have this second chance. And what it does is, like, if more than one moderators on Hacker News, I don't really understand what happened. There's some people looking at submissions and look like if that would have been good submissions, but they just slip through the new page, then they get a second chance, and they randomly display it on the front page for some time, and they reset the age counter, so it gets a new age penalty. Starts on the front page, and that's what happened to us. So I guess we got a little push from the
right. Now, I never submit articles to Hacker News with my account, and I wonder if there's any sort of reputation system that affects the probability of ranking. You mentioned completely new accounts.
I don't think so.
No.
Although I think the new accounts are shown with a green font. So maybe that's a cue that people look at, but that's probably a minute detail and not necessarily plays a large role.
Yeah. Well, in any case, I'll submit my articles at some point, and certainly your advice on how to maximize my chance of ranking is something I'd appreciate.
Yeah, I think the best tactic is to just submit several times, because then you increase the probability of getting exposed to enough attention at some point.
Yep.
And then it's a little bit of a gamble if it's going into the positive feedback loop.
Yep.
At this point.
Yeah, a bit of a lottery.
Like our analysis shows that you have to submit it around 5 times.
Interesting.
But yeah, like wait, like don't do it just like that. Like wait 1 or 2 days in between, because maybe you get into a second chance pool.
Yep. Yeah, that's very interesting. If you think of something like Hacker News or any sort of link aggregator as a system for discovery of quality content, you've got this exploitation trade-off, and I wonder if there's any other ways to improve that and improve the probability of discovering content that maybe is not very impressive based on the headline, or other ways of discovering content that might be overlooked based on things like social connections and social networks.
So my original idea of balancing the feedback loop was only use downvotes. That has some very interesting characteristics. Because the thing is, like, if you only have upvotes, then things that people don't look at, or people are which people are unsure about or don't have an opinion on, gets a penalty if you only have upvotes. But if you only have downvotes, then these what people are unsure about or whatever, these don't get the penalty, and only everything else gets a penalty. So they get more visibility. And this way, I think that greatly improves the discovery, because then people look at it who actually have an opinion.
Right. And then that kind of gets into the idea of argument, where if somebody doesn't upvote a post, but they don't downvote it, it could be just that it's very exciting, but it's not problematic. It doesn't contain misinformation, or it could be the case that it has a great headline, but when you go and actually click, you find that there's not good content, or it's not well written. And so negative feedback can provide that information. And it's good to have a mechanism where other people can go evaluate something for you and say, yeah, maybe this looks interesting, but we've looked at it and it's probably not worth your time. And especially if you have maybe downvotes coupled with reasons, or even a tag, tag this as being poorly written or misinformed, something like that. And then of course there could be an argument if you don't agree with that. If a few people tag it as misinformed, you can say, actually, you're mistaken. It says something that is not considered generally to be true, but we back this up with this other information. And then you get into the whole scoring of arguments.
Depends what kind of system you want to create. Like if you only want to create a news aggregator, then it's... So what I wanted to say about news aggregators is like, or about these protocols, because you suggested like using tags or reasons or whatever. That really depends on the goal of the platform. Like, and I think a news aggregator is something to draw attention of the whole community. And if you introduce something like labels, like, oh, this is poorly written or whatever, that just introduces biases and doesn't let people look themselves anymore. And they just follow the bias. And then the the voting score gets skewed because of that
Well,
bias.
So then what do you mean biases? So there's a bias in the sense that what you see is what other people think is worthy of upvote. And what we'd be doing is saying, well, just create kind of a new criteria so that what you see on the front page is not just what other people have upvoted, but what they've upvoted after discussion. And so it's biased towards, you know, post-discussion opinion instead of pre-discussion opinion.
Yeah, but it probably will happen. Like, let's say you only have downvotes, and then someone tags something with poorly written, then some people would just downvote it but without looking at it, and then they just reinforce the opinion of that single person who added the tag.
Interesting. Yeah, it's like even if you just show upvotes and downvotes.
Exactly.
People will say, a lot of people downvoted, now I'm going to downvote it. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I wonder if there's a way to mitigate for that.
I think there's even there's something that's very controversially discussed in the social media world. I think what social cues do to users' perception and their behavior with regard to the content. So if it influences how they interact with the content after seeing the social cues.
Yep. Yeah, and so I think there's maybe two things. One is don't show the social cues so they can't have an impact. So you can still downvote something, but give a reason, you know, say, I think it's written, but maybe people don't see the downvote counts with or without the tags.
It would be interesting if it's possible, or it makes sense to show the opposite social cue. Like if there are a lot of downvotes, show to the user that there are a lot of upvotes and see if the user says, what, this is upvoted, and then reacts more strongly
right, yeah,
in their own direction or something.
Interesting. Yeah.
Although, I mean, this could become predictable for the users as well.
Yeah, that could.
True. Yeah.
There's also the possibility, so you have social cues that cause people to behave in a certain way, but I wonder if there's ways of controlling for that in the data. So you say, I know that showing that people thought this was well written is causing them to, more people to click, but I can actually calculate the effect exactly and adjust for it. And then why would I want to still post the fact that some people thought it was well written? And the answer is so that people can respond and say, actually, I think it is well written, and here's why.
Yeah, but the whole thing, like, I think people learn those, as you said, like if I show the opposite bias, then people will learn it. I think people learn the behavior of the system anyways. Like if you only provide an upvote button, no matter how you label it, people will realize, oh, if I click this button, it will be shown higher in the list, and then the community draws more attention to it, right? No matter what the label says.
Yep. And then, of course, maybe, so even, let's say you do have maybe two different types of downvote buttons. One is, and you label them like this, you label one, this is bad behavior, like something that shouldn't be on the site. It's spam or it's pornography or something like that. And we don't have that in Hacker News because of the moderators, but let's say you didn't have that. You had the ability, and the same with comments. You could downvote a comment because the comment is a personal attack. And sometimes you get that on Hacker News. And so one option is downvote for bad behavior, and whether the other is downvote that just says, I disagree. But let's say the actual behavior of those buttons is different. So the one that says bad behavior, two things happen. One is if only a few people downvote for bad behavior, it gets penalized very quickly. But the other is your reputation is staked on that. So if you download something for bad behavior and the moderators or other people with karma don't think it's bad behavior, you've abused your reputation and you lose reputation score.
Right.
And then So I think once you have reputation systems, you can correct for the fact that people learn to game the system. And so instead of people just downvoting things they don't like, they now have to be very careful about what they downvote and for what reasons. And then if you downvote something because you just disagree, which I think happens a lot, maybe there's less of a penalty. Or if you just don't think it's interesting, maybe it's not penalty, right? We just, what is the correct way to evaluate that data that you thought, oh, this is just boring. Okay, well, you thought it was boring, but a lot of people thought it was interesting. And so, in that case, maybe the formula is, just ignore those downvotes and just look at the total upvotes to see how many people saw it was interesting, or a ratio. But in any case, you treat that case differently than the case of downvoting for bad behavior.
Yeah, that's interesting because Hacker News actually has these two, or they have the upvote button that's visible to everyone. Then at a certain level of karma, 100 or something, people get a flag button for comments and stories. So only very long-term community members have the ability to flag stuff.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. That probably does contribute to the quality of discussion on Hacker News, I would guess.
I think so too. It takes a long time to get to that level.
And they are really good at filtering out the unproductive debate. Although I think it's kind of in the interface, they show the flag comments in like a more blurred way, or in a, like the alpha value is toned down, so it doesn't stand out from the background anymore as much.
Yeah, it looks great.
Ironically, or conversely, makes it more salient when you look at the entire page. So you're asking yourself, why is this comment blurred out or not blurred out? It stands out if you look at the whole page. So this is a weird kind of thing that's happening in the user interface, or in the web interface.
Yeah, although I notice that I tend to not read those comments, even though they say.
I think it's you read them at first because you're curious, when you don't know the meaning of what it means that a comment is flagged, but after a time it's very repetitive, because these kinds of comments are usually have some ad hominem tags and
yeah, although not always. Sometimes I do see, because sometimes I do read them for curiosity, and I do see comments that don't seem to be perfectly civil. But they
maybe overly sarcastic is something that I see a lot. Like a comment is a little on the sarcastic side, but not necessarily unproductive. I think that's what happens sometimes.
Yeah, or just conveying opinions that some people find problematic, but are not necessarily, but should be opinions that should be discussed. Especially if you get into social issues or politics.
Yeah, does that answer? Oh, it's okay. Go ahead.
I think that's something that Hacker News tries to disincentivize all together, controversial topics. Yeah.
But did that answer your question, Jonathan? About like, are there different news aggregator algorithms or formulas?
Well, that's something I definitely I'm interested in exploring further. I think, I wonder if a news aggregator type site might not be a good starting point for a community in which structured argumentation occurs. I'm just not sure exactly how it would work. Because the advantage of the news aggregator is you can get, for example, the stories of the day, the things that are really interesting that people are talking about. So you can get a large number of people talking about something, which is, I think, important to really extract the benefit of distributed Bayesian reasoning and structured debate. So these are good starting points for arguments. But then where do you go from there?
I mean, it's a good way to draw the critical mass of people to one topic. So you actually map a topic out, all the argument trees and everything.
Yep. And even,
I mean, go ahead.
Even, for example, Hacker News could be a starting point because there's an API. You know, you can have maybe a Hacker News client where you add features on top of it for more structured argumentation.
And many people do. Like, there's so many Hacker News clients out there.
Yep.
Yeah, and maybe, I mean, there might be potential as well for older stories that kind of become classics to seep into a more rounded form of argument or debating. So you have the topicality of the front page, but then there are like there's the best page or I think there are pages which are more persistent that store stories for a longer time and that don't rely on topicality that much.
What do you mean topicality? You mean currency?
Yeah, basically. So that it doesn't.
Right.
It's not about being current to the time. So
yeah. And there's also in these conversations what comes up. If you look at the conversations that happen, often there's a claim that somebody makes that people debate whether that's true or not, or whether they agree with it. And so there might be an opportunity to extract some of these claims, and even though they were made in the context of a specific article, give those claims canonicality or a life outside of just the current discussion.
By the way, on the topic of claims and having data on them, did you see the link that I posted to the CDL related projects channel?
I checked it out, yes.
So I found that on Hacker News. Probably many of the CDL people have seen it as well. I thought that might be interesting at some point in terms of mining claims or having a large library of potential claims, because I think it's basically an immense body of scientific literature broken up into n-grams.
Of size 5, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's 5 grams.
Free
so it's not very useful for humans to read. Maybe search, but I think they did it because of copyright issues. Like if they only cite 5 words, then it's not a copyright infringement or something.
Now, have you guys looked at all into the field of argument mining?
Not really, no.
Not really, no.
What they're trying to do is extract the structure of arguments, extracting claims and oppose and support relationships between claims from the internet, from things like social media.
What I'm always wondering about these approaches, like which kind of data model do they use?
I think there's lots of different data models, but I think the idea of having a claim and then some sort of argument relationship between claims is pretty common.
I mean, that's also as far as we got with CDL, like since 2 years, that's where we are at.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw, but I've created an argument model essay. So there's a distributed Bayesian reasoning introduction, and I've cut that down a lot, based partly on your feedback, Felix, and other people's feedback.
Did you talk to Bentley, by the way?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, because I told him to read your articles because that's his topic, basically.
Yeah. We did have, and he wants me to. He'd like to collaborate at some point if I have some working code where I take some of his data, and because I could take the data in his structure and he's got some more data than what he's got, votes and things as well, and so I could take that data and try to run it through my formula and see what happens. I think that'd be very interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't read your second part yet. I don't know. Are you still working on it?
I'm still working on it.
Yesterday I opened it and I didn't have fresh enough mind to go into the math.
And that's fine. The math is, it's, you don't necessarily need to to understand the math. I I just want to have it very well explained so that it's implementable and justifiable. I want people to be able to that do understand the math, to be able to critique it, and to be able to say, yeah, I think, I see exactly what you're doing here, and here's what might not work, or and this seems valid. So I want that all very clearly spelled out. But then there's another article called the model, and what I've done is I've defined with pictures and everything the argument model, which is pretty much the CDL argument model, slightly different terminology, but with with graphs and everything to try to clearly illustrate the difference between an argument that opposes a claim or the premise of another argument versus an argument that opposes the relevance. And I'm using the term warrant because that's a term used in argumentation theory, and relevance. I'm kind of debating between using relevance, but unfortunately that term is kind of overloaded and means other things in other fields, including probability. And so anyways, but it's basically the same model. I think that's...
Okay, so maybe you should put that at the top of the second part article, if it's not already there.
Yeah, well, it's linked in the other article, not at the very top, but
yeah.
I should put it there. There's a point in the article where it says, okay, now, as we get into the math, we're going to use some terminology, and you need to understand all these terms.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, if you submit your articles to Hacker News, they should be like, yeah, make sure that many people read it and ask them to say that your goal is that you want it to be as understandable as possible. That's what I did with the Hacker News article. And then I got really good feedback because people actually admitted that they didn't get something.
Right. Yep. You mean in the post to Hacker News, you say, hey, look, I just want this to be understandable.
No, in the feedback you gather before posting it to Hacker News.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
Like really show it to 2 people, get the feedback, iterate, show it to the next 2 people, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a good process.
Yeah.
Here's the argument model if you're interested in that.
That's localhost, I think.
What was that? Oh, so that's, yeah. Let's see. It's the same.
And then, yeah, another feedback I wanted to give you, like the whole jury and trial example is a bit hard to understand for non-native English speakers, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like I'm not used to these terms.
Right.
Yeah, I think the common law is also a little different in all the countries. So there are different roles to a jury in Germany.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if there's another, because it doesn't have a jury trial. Is a story that I feel like a lot of people can understand, but maybe there's another story or another example. I'm not sure what.
I like it because it's realistic, because it's not a synthetic example. Because like your other blog article had one with like, oh, where should we have lunch? Like,
yep.
That's a very artificial example. Like nobody would use an argument like that. Right?
Right.
But for the trial example, of course, yes. But that's something. Yeah, maybe we find another story that still requires the same argumentation to make a decision.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, a company decision or an investment decision or whatever. That's easily understandable even for different cultures. And
yep. Yeah. All right. I need to think about that. See if I can come up with something.
By the way, Jonathan, do you have an RSS feed on your blog?
I don't know.
I think Jekyll generates one. Or depending on the theme.
Jekyll that generates one.
Yeah, I probably just need to configure something so that it's included. Yeah, I should probably put that link on the bottom of the pages, right?
Yeah. I think it's usually, I think Jekyll generates one that's just called feed.xml or something like that, or
Right.
atom.xml. I don't know. It's pretty easily found.
Yep, I just typed /feed.xml. There it is.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just realized I have the same on my blog. That's cool.
All right, guys. Well, this is a good conversation.
Yeah, I think social protocols is really an apt name for this conversation, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Like it's so broad, and it still has the interesting bits. It's really like what I'm mostly interested in, also in the whole CDL conversation.
Yeah, me too. I think it's the it's a big important problem for society. People don't realize that what's happening in these social platforms are, they are social protocols that are determining what information spreads, influences people's belief, perception of reality.
And nobody's naming these things. Everybody's just surprised.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's just introducing that concept, making an essay that says, hey, look what's happening in society as a protocol. And there are decisions being made by the group and according to this protocol, and yet nobody has designed the protocol purposefully. And a lot of people don't even realize it exists, but the decisions made by the protocol are incredibly impactful for society, and we should all care what the protocol is.
Exactly. That's for like governments the same way as for social media.
Yeah. Yep. And mainstream media.
And mainstream media, of course. Yeah. So what I recently, like a recent insight for me is like many of those protocols are really just intention drawing mechanisms.
Yep.
Different ways, like TV, for example. Wait.
Say that again.
Yeah, I pull out that list for a sec because I wrote it down. They're really like many protocols fit into that category, like drawing attention. Like the news aggregator decides what the whole community should draw attention.
Right. Yeah. Versus a recommender, which is what you individually. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like attention based, or like the advertising is okay. I can pay, get other people's, or to draw other people's attention to something specific.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
I mean that also plays a little bit into what I've been trying to do for some platforms to find out what people actually try to optimize for. So I recently did a little study. It's not finished yet, where I just downloaded 100 pages which taught you in a list how to get more followers on Twitter, to see what people are doing to game the protocol basically, and what they are trying to do. And I think that's how you find out what the protocol is, basically.
Right, you find out how people game the protocol, and then you know what the protocol is.
But gaming positive feedback loops is not actually gaming it. It's just like trying to optimize it more. It's just like you're still going into the same direction, and you're just fighting other people who also optimize for the same thing. And it's really like a optimizing competition, and it's like very arbitrary who wins.
Yeah. It's like saying a football player, who runs really fast and tricks the other player is gaming the rules of football. in order to win. But no, he's just playing the game. You know, all these different strategies and techniques are just way to win given the rules as defined.
Yeah, true.
Another important thing I'd like to talk about is recommender systems. Because what recommender systems inherently do is they cluster users and then create bubbles. Like that's the goal of them. And then now everybody's surprised. Oh, people are in bubbles now, right? And I'm wondering, can we design recommender systems that don't create bubbles? And the answer is probably no, because then they're not recommender systems. Because that's the ultimate goal of recommender systems.
But perhaps you can change the nature of the bubbles. So one insight I have is things that are recommended to you they're recommending something that will draw your attention. You'll click on or you'll watch or engage with, but that does not necessarily equal the things that you want your attention to be drawn to. The fact that you get drawn in doesn't mean you're happy with the results. And if people step back and they look at their time on social media, they say, look, I'm reading these, I've been watching these stupid videos that haven't taught me anything, that haven't been uplifting. I am scrolling through this feed, on Twitter and seeing arguments that people are, well, not Twitter is not a recommender system, but
I think it is.
Just feeding people what they like is not actually what people want. I think that's a really important insight. Everyone assumes that, well, of course, that they click like, if they're reading, if they're clicking, it's what they want. I don't think that's actually the case.
I think it might even be the opposite, right? I mean, if you look at the Facebook leaks from recently, it seems like they're optimizing on outrageous content that keeps you upset more than happy.
And so people are being kind of manipulated. So they optimize that outrageous content. So you're seeing all this outrageous content. Maybe you respond and you get into an argument and you don't like that. So it's unhealthy. And so I think there's potentially a new paradigm shift where people say, look, let's actually create, we don't have to have these dumb feedback loops that just feed you what you want or what you like. We can intentionally create healthy environments that in the long run will still create a feedback loop, but it's a feedback loop that operates on a larger time scale. There's a difference between first order effects and second order effects. Often in Yahoo, we used to talk about that all the time. The first order effect was something that you could measure with an A/B test. You change the color of a button and it gets so many more clicks. That's a first order effect, immediate effect. But what is the long-term effect of people clicking that button more? And those are much harder to measure with an A/B test. But I think the new paradigm for social media will be more focused on second order effects, the long-term effects of the design choices.
That's something people have to go to first and understand.
Yep. But society is getting there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Do you know why Hacker News doesn't have tags?
No.
They basically, that came up a lot of times, and many people were suggesting, oh, please give us tags so we can tag stuff, and like people can only see the AI topics or whatever. They said no, because we don't want to divide the community. Tags would divide the community, because then people only look at this kind of content, other people only look at this kind of content, and then it basically clusters the people and divides the Hacker News community. So they say, okay, no, we have only one front page and everybody looks at that same front page.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
So even without a recommender system, even just introducing a tagging system, clusters the people, divides the people.
Yeah, really great point. Super great point. Yeah. So that little document you were just showing, I wonder if you could make a graphic out of that.
attention.
The attention document, like the different ways. It's almost like a topology. You can draw a bunch of little people, little stick figures, you know, and the news aggregator draws a circle around that group, and then you can have an item, you know, that their attention is drawn to. You can illustrate how the whole group is drawing attention to that one item versus TikTok, where you have 50 people and 50 items, or actually you have clusters. But anyways, I feel like that an image might really convey this message potentially really well.
Yeah, but what does it help? Like, does it give you better? Like, I mean, I wrote it down for me. It's like, oh wow, this makes sense. But I'm wondering what the message here is.
I think maybe there could be a good blog post illustrating this idea.
But what would be the goal of the blog post? Like, what do I want to communicate?
Well,
that there is a model to look at this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, a good question. I feel like every time I have an idea that becomes clear for me, I think about how, you know, I could write an article to make it clear for other people. You know, I think ultimately, you know, a good question on who would actually read that post, but I think there's certainly a group of people that would find that very interesting.
I mean, there's also a mimetic aspect to it. So this way of thinking about it might be very productive for designing future social protocols. And if it spreads, it's a good thing.
Yeah, you know, exactly. All these ideas, if we can help other people understand them, there's the potential for spread. And if not, even people, you know, working on, you know, I hope as my ideas advance and I become more concrete and I actually start building something, you know, have more collaborators, and the ability to convey some of these foundational ideas will be valuable.
I have to find a time to do it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's necessarily probably a high priority for you, but just
So right now it's like about finishing. I stopped many personal research projects because it was too much. So right now I'm just focusing on CDL and finishing the Hacker News article.
Yeah, it's a problem. You've got to focus.
Since I have too many unfinished started projects and nothing finished, that really makes me unhappy.
Yeah, what you mean.
Well, hey, guys, should we call it a day?
Run, yep.